Welcome to Women in Reefing, and today we're going to be talking about Pico tanks and vases.
The goal of Women in Reefing is to celebrate and acknowledge the successes of women from every area of the hobby and industry. We do this by sharing a different woman's story each week. And this week, we talk to multiple women.
We're so excited to have here Kelly and Joanne and Vikki.
And of course, Patty. So before we jump into talking about the actual Picos and Vases, which are very, very cool, I wanted to just learn a very brief little bit about the women that are sharing with us today. So Vikki, tell me a little bit about how you got started in saltwater and your just overall journey.
Okay, so I had a nano tank about 10 years ago I wanted to get a seahorse tank, and I wanted to start out with hard fish. And actually my first fish was a mandarin, and I had him for 5 years. He was wild caught, and I trained him on frozen food. And I experienced the heartache of seahorses. And I will never do that again. I will enjoy other people's seahorses from a distance. So yeah, I got totally burned out on that 37-gallon nano tank. And for about 5 minutes, I got out of the hobby. I sold everything. And then I heard about Pico reefs, and specifically reef bowls, which are kind of a different kind of Pico reef. I mean, it's basically a low maintenance Pico.
Tell us about your journey, Joanne.
I've had saltwater tanks since probably 2008. I've always had larger tanks. For the most part, I've always been trained as a bigger is better because it requires less management kind of person. So I have a 125-gallon tank. I have an 80-gallon tank. And then I have I measured it the other day, a 1-gallon vase. So.
And how about you, Patty?
I had saltwater tanks for around 9 years now, and I did started with the whole, bigger is better. And then for me, it wasn't better. For me I started with like 90-gallon tank with a 40-gallon sump. And then I found it overwhelming. Then I went down to like 60 gallons with a 20-gallon sump. And then I went down to 20 gallons and then 10 gallons. And so, yeah. And also is with now that I live here in New York City, where we have a small townhome, is better. I don't have space for a big tank. So my biggest tank currently is 100 gallons, like full system. So it's more like a 70 gallons with around 20 some gallon sump. And then since I moved here, I started with like a 15 gallon. Then I went up a little bit, but then I went and did a 2-gallon Pico tank, and I really enjoyed it. And to me, it's so easy, just because if big water change every week, and then that's it.
So as a person who's never done a Pico, because I'm still in the world of bigger is better, because I haven't tried anything else. I mean, my very first tank was a 55-gallon mixed reef with a 40-gallon sump. When I started with seahorses, I did start small in a 20-gallon that I ended up adding a sump to. And then when I got better at breeding seahorses, I had to really upgrade because there were just too many of them. So it was a good thing I did upgrade to the 65-gallon with a 40-gallon sump. Now, when I did collect different species of seahorses, I did keep them in much smaller tanks, but it just seemed like a lot more work. Yeah, I do completely understand what all of you guys are saying. And, like the latest seahorse tank I just put up is an all-in-one. And I'm testing it out because I know that people really do want to find easier ways to reef, and still enjoy the beauty and without all of the crazy equipment and anyways. So
it really can't be a job. Otherwise you're going to fail at it. We have enough jobs in our lives.
Right? Amen. So I love that we're sharing how to do, something much more simple that's still amazing. So how do Pico tanks actually work?
Okay, so with the initial caveat that these vary a lot from person to person, the way it works for me is I really aimed to cover all the bases in as few ways as possible. So I have a lid on my Vase Reefs, so I don't need an auto top off. There's no need for auto top off. Evaporation is negligible, so there's no need for that. I don't need to dose because I do an 80 to 100% water change once a week. So no dosing, no daily attention. I think it's unethical to have fish in a tank less than 5 gallons, so no fish to feed every day. I didn't want to take up space with a big heater that might fail because aquarium heaters usually have a crappy thermostat inside them. So I have a little tiny beta heater with a temperature controller. So the temperature probe is in there and the actual controller is outside the tank. So the heater is reliable. It's been working for the past 5 years. And I don't have any circulation pump inside because that takes up tons of space. So I just have an open air stone, like an airline. And those are pretty reliable too. So simple, reliable, yes, there's only those few failure points, but they're unlikely to fail because they're just simple, reliable equipment. I like to feed my corals a ton. So I do one big feeding with a huge variety of food once a week and give them a few days to, digest their food. And then I do a huge water change. I took a lot of care to take care of pests and things like that early on. Like I used to dip my corals. I've gotten a little more lax about that because I'm more interested lately in biodiversity and kind of seeing what comes in on corals that's good and not bad, which is hard and risky. Yeah, so those are the basics of it. I have them underneath a cheap par 38 lamp that costs $25 because kind of part of my sort of, ethos of this part of the hobby is, doing everything in an affordable, inexpensive way. My biggest problem is corals attacking each other and having to do a lot of fragging. And the upside of that is actually for the past couple of years, my reef bowls have more or less paid for themselves because I frag corals and trade them in at the local fish store.
You said your Pico tanks have paid for themselves. So how long have you been keeping them?
So I've had one for 5 years and I've had another one for 3 years. And I actually just started a 1 quart reef jar that I may or may not keep. And my 3-year-old reef bowl, I'm about to retire because I got a nano. I just got a Fluval Evo 13.5, an enormous tank. And yeah, so I'm gonna try to take some of these low maintenance principles to the Evo and still make this a low maintenance system because I want to be able to travel. One thing that's cool about these reef bowls is I usually don't open them more than once a week, so I can go for week-long trips. I've done it. It's a risk, but I've done it a bunch of times and nothing bad has happened.
So would you just not feed in that week or?
Yeah, I mean, I only feed the corals once a week, and I don't have any complicated inverts. I don't have hermit crabs. I really try not to keep anything that if it dies within 6 months, then I'm not going to replace it with something else. I'm going to assume that it's not going to live in that system. I don't want to, I'm trying to be good, and only use aquacultured corals and I don't know, I do think about our impact on the oceans. I know it's really small compared to all the other crap that, that big companies and governments do, but aquacultured coral is cool. Captive bred fish are cool. I'm going to try to do all captive bred for my huge nano tank.
Love it. And that's what it's funny. Joanne and Patty were with me for the last Women in Reefing featured video. And this theme keeps coming up every time, about aquaculture. We care about what's going on. Very, very cool. So what coral have you found to work well for you in the Picos?
So zoanthids are great. So I've got, what do I have? I've got a huge colony of bubblegum Montipora digitata that's just overwhelming. And I'm just desperately trying to trim it down. Gonioporas, for whatever reason, do really well. I have a bright pink Goniopora that I've had for 5 years and I've fragged it many, many times. Blastomusa works great. Frog spawn works fantastic. What else do I have? I have a ton of different kinds of zoanthids. Nephthia or Sinularia, I'm not sure exactly which, does really well. Acropora did really well until I moved the lights up because I felt like the zoanthids were suffering under too much light. And I guess I like zoanthids more than I like Acropora. So the Acropora all died and their skeletons got colonized by zoanthids.
Oh, wow.
So I have zoanthid trees in my 5-year-old reef bowl.
That's kind of cool. That is really kind of cool. So what is there any specific coral that you can think of that you tried and just aside from Acropora, if you don't do the lighting right, and that makes sense. You have to keep what works together, in the same situation. But is there any specific coral that just, did not work out well from the get-go?
From the get-go, I think I had I think it was a Stylopora that I picked up at a frag swap, and it just failed to thrive and died within a couple of weeks. There was what's it called? Cyphastria, failed to thrive, just didn't really make it. Acans do really well, although they seem to they change in weird ways, and sometimes they die, and I'm not sure why. So I don't know. Generally speaking, most of the frags that I put in there do pretty well.
Nice.
But Acroporas need more light than I'm willing to give. So they have flow too, and it's a wonderful random flow. It's keeps stuff suspended. I don't have a deep sand bed. I have just enough aragonite to keep the rocks from moving around. When I'm doing maintenance, I kind of blow the hell out of everything with a turkey baster to get all the detritus suspended and get it all out of there. I treat nuisance algae with hydrogen peroxide.
Oh, nice.
If I have any kind of nuisance algae, I just after I drain all the water out, I take a little paintbrush and dip it in 35% food grade hydrogen peroxide, which is crazy intense stuff, and just kind of touch it to the algae, and it kills it. Nice. I very often accidentally, do collateral damage to corals, but they always bounce back. They always open up again the next day. Yeah,
they're more resilient than our algae, luckily.
They really are. They're amazingly resilient, and they can handle being out in the air. I see a lot of fear about, oh my God, do I have to perpetually keep this coral always underwater? Will it be bad if I take it out of the bag and have it in the air before I move it in the tank? Yeah, it's okay. I make a lot of use of tweezers and tongs and hemostats, and I almost never stick my hand in there because it's too small to stick my hand in. So yeah, so having a real aquarium now is really strange.
I bet, and we can't wait to see your journey with that too. Joanne, tell me about your Pico. Is it Pico or Vase? Yours is a Vase.
Mine is a Vase, yeah. So I'm fairly new to the game, but I find it really interesting. So it was last spring when we're all really bored, stuck at home with COVID. I decided I did not want to support Amazon with anything, but I was really bored. So I said, okay, can I start a Pico tank with all the fish junk I have laying around my house? So I have a 9-inch vase, like a flower vase that I just had left over. I pulled about 3 inches of sand out of my main tank and used that as a sand bed. Had an old par 38 that I think I probably bought in 2010 and had used for years on an old 20-gallon Nano I had for a while. But it still lights up, so I threw that on. A couple dry rocks and one hitchhiker stomatella to get it started.
Stomatella, I love stomatellas.
Right. And so they and I just let it sit. And all it's running is an airline, so I don't have a heater. It's just a par 38 and an airline. And I keep a little bit of carbon in just a little bit of pantyhose, and I have a carbon float on it. It just kind of floats around. I don't know. I use aquachar in all of my tanks, so it's aquachar carbon, which is supposed to have some biological benefits to it. So it's literally like one piece of equipment. And so I don't have any top off. I don't have a lid on it, so evaporation's a bit of a thing for me. I keep a little water jug and I just top it off. I was traveling last week, gone for the whole week, and my partner decided to totally ignore it, not put any water. So it was probably down like an inch, but I just put more water in it. It's fine. All I have in there right now is, and I think I'm just going to keep it species specific because I don't want to make things complicated, is some Indo mushrooms, like Rhodactis type. So, I mean, in my opinion, those are pretty much bulletproof anyhow, but they're really pretty. So things that I find really interesting about it, because I was like, oh, there's no way this is going to work. I put that little snail in there in the beginning, and I'm just like, let's just see. So I have these old, these giant thermometers my dad gave me years ago for measuring the temperature of milk because he worked at a dairy. Right? So I've got a milk thermometer in there, and it's always the same temperature, no matter what time of day it is. And I thought, well, with the thing that I'd always been told about PICOs is temperature management's a problem, right? Now it's always cold-ish. It's probably about 72, right? But that's fine. I keep my quarantine tank at 72 because I don't want things to breed prolifically and I don't want things to grow. So I keep it cold. And, I'm in Seattle, so it's not like we get really hot or anything during the day. Our house is probably 68, 69, something like that. So I think it's really random how it's absolutely touch-free. A little water change here and there, and I watch my little mushrooms. They're splitting, starting to get. I'm up to 2 now. Started with 1, now I have 2. I think 3's on his way.
I haven't. I actually never had mushrooms in any of my reef bowls because I was afraid they'd take over.
Yeah, I bet they would grow too fast at a higher temperature.
That would make sense. That totally makes sense.
And Joanne, in your case, you want them to take over, right? That's the whole point.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
They're
They're rainbow mushrooms. They can be from edge to edge. Yeah. Who cares? And they'll outcompete my 1 snail. Actually, I'm up to 2 snails. I added a Necerius the other day too. They're snailing around.
Snailing around. Love it. Okay. All right. Miss Patty, tell me about your Pico. What's in it? What's going on with it? How do you do it?
Yeah, so mine are a bit more shallow Picos, so they're long. So I have one that is like a square. I don't remember but it's almost like 12 by 12 by 12. It might not be the exact measurement, but it's pretty much a square. And it's like maybe 4 or 5 inches tall. And the other one is a 2-gallon, and it is it's longer though. It's like a shallow, long Pico. And I do have a heater because my house, in New York, the temperature goes crazy. So I do have heaters, and I do have, one is actually attached to a controller. So it measures, there's an auto top up for it, and there is a temp control for it and heater. And that has been pretty sweet because I pretty much don't touch it either. Just once a week, do a big water change. And that's pretty much it. And this is the square one. And I do have a variety of corals in there. I even have a rock flower anemone. I have inhabitants. I actually have a sexy shrimp. And I have one, I think it's Strucus snail. And then I also have microalgae in there, 2 different types of microalgae. And then I have mushrooms. I have psoas or zoanthids. I have goniporas, alevopora, and I think that's it for now. But I'm planning on putting more rock flower anemones on that one because it's square, so I have a pretty good, real estate on it. And then lighting on that one is actually an AI prime, which is crazy because that's 16, it can be for a 20-gallon tank. But it was something that I had extra, so I didn't have to buy an extra light. So that's why I'm using it. It's definitely overkill. It's only 5% intensity, so I don't burn everything. And then on my other one, which is the shallow Pico, which is a rectangular, there is a 2-gallon one. So that one I have a Kessel A80. And again, another light that I had extra. Again, like, you know, budget friendly light will work. And on that one, I have also sexy shrimp. And I have more, I have a Goni Pora and a Level Pora too. I also have the same macro algae that I have on the other tank. And what else do I have in there? Mushrooms, swan baits, and Duncan. I have a big Duncan that it started with like 1 head and now it's like 5 to 6 heads. I have, and a candy cane coral. It's doing pretty good. Yeah, and I still have more space. What surprised me the most is how much you can put in such a small tank. You know, you don't think about it, and then things start to grow, and you see, and then like sometimes I will like look, and I'm like, this is a lot of coral that you can put in such a small space, and it's so easy because it's like in the one that is not control. I have an out of top of, which is a bottle. And everything is so cost effective. You know, you can seriously put one of these little tanks together for like what, maybe $60. Realistically, let's say 100, but that's like nothing compared to if you get a full tank, you know. And taking care of it, yeah, I don't touch it. Like the only time I touch it is once a week, do like a 80-90% as much as I can take out without like the sexy shrimp, you know, staying in the water. You know, mixing the water and getting water ready is like nothing, because in total it's like what, 4.3 gallons both of my Picos together. So yeah, I think a lot of people fear that, oh, it's such a small tank, I'm not gonna be able to keep it stable, this and that. But the reality is that all you have to do is a big water change once a week, I think, you know.
Do they ever become cycled, or is the bottom line that you're just replacing the water weekly?
I mean, the cycling happens in terms of colonizing bacteria on the rocks that are in there.
Yeah, people do fear that everything, like the cycle, is on the water, and the reality is that most of the beneficial bacteria is on your sand bed and on your rock. So as long as you do the water change quickly, then you're good. I mean, if you're waiting an hour, you know, and let everything kind of dry, then that becomes a problem. But normally, like, water changes are so easy. I mean, I just grab a little cup and remove most of the water and put water back on. Check salinity, because that's one thing. Make sure that your salinity is good, because in such a small water with such a small water volume, your salinity really can, sway. But besides that, yeah.
Joanne, how often do you do water changes?
I do water changes once a week. Well, no, every 2 weeks, actually, because I only do it when I'm doing water changes on my main systems. And I do that every other week. And I'll do probably like a 50% water change in the vase. For a long time, I didn't do a water change at all, especially when I wanted to be sure it was cycling. And I didn't see any diatom cycling with it. I have kind of like a stringy, not hair algae, just a stringy algae that grows in there now. And that's kind of the algae that cycled through. I had the really fine hair algae for a while. Now it's moved into the bigger, kind of easier to manage stuff that you can just pick out. And I just do a couple cups. I dip a couple cups in, and then I put a couple cups back.
How important is sand in a Pico reef?
So there's one example of a vase reef that I emulated that's pretty, I guess, well known in the scene or whatever. It's called Maritza the Vase Reef. And that one has a deep sand bed that's not been disturbed for like 9 years. So that one works for them. I didn't do that. And mine works just fine. So, as long as you've got some kind of live rock in there, have sand, don't have sand, you do you.
Would you guys say that coral is less or more sensitive than fish?
Way less.
That's what I figured.
A couple weeks ago, Bulk Reef Supply put out a call on their Facebook page for like, hey, promote your Instagram or whatever, or your tank or something like that. And so I was like, hey, I've had a 2-gallon reef bowl for 5 years. And they featured it on their page. And the comments on there were like, man, they were so old school. The comments were like, oh my God, are you doing water changes every 10 minutes? Mm-hmm. temperature swings, auto top off. Oh my God. And like, yeah, people just do not understand the concept. Like a lot more people do now than they used to because more people are hearing about it and seeing examples of it working. But yeah, there's a lot of old school in the reefing scene and they just do not get how it can work. And the weird thing is corals are sensitive, but they're only sensitive in particular ways. And, you know, within that sensitivity, there's a ton of leeway. Once you understand that, you get how you can have a little tiny coral ecosystem that's also low maintenance.
So is it the ease of maintenance or lack of equipment? What's the main appeal to doing a Pico tank?
I was right with Patty. Like my first tank was 37 gallons and I found it totally overwhelming. You know, I got an oversized skimmer, I got a chiller, you know, I had equipment failing. I had, you know, I'd get expensive light fixtures and they would fail. I mean, the most reliable fixtures I've ever freaking had have been those $25 par 38s. I haven't had to replace one yet.
Right.
I was so thinking about that the other day. Gosh, when I started, like if you had a MaxiJet 1200, that's all you needed, like one in each corner of your tank, right? And then we had the Corellias, and those only they wouldn't break, but the shields would fall off, and then you'd have an impeller in the sand somewhere, right? Or the suction cups would stop working; they'd always fall down, and so we all didn't like those, and we all had to go with these magnetic ones, and I probably have 20 old power heads in my closet that either like didn't work as well and I thought I'd try the new thing or whatever. And I was thinking about it the other day and I'm like, you know what pump I still have that I still use that I got with that first tank in 2008 is the stupid MaxiJet. It's an Eheim, actually, an old Eheim. When they stopped making the impellers, I went and I bought a bunch off eBay and I have a shelf of them because that pump will probably never die as long as the plastic impeller part doesn't fall off, right? But
No, yeah.
I have a couple newer power heads that I bought just a couple of years ago with the fancy controllers, and now they're starting to not work. And I'm like, well, do I spend another $100 on another head for this thing, or do I scrap it and go? It's so stupid.
What is the definition of Pico? Is there any gallon qualification?
My understanding from the forums is that it's 5 gallons or less.
Gotcha.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, 5 gallons or less. And some people even say, well, if it's 5 gallons or less, but without like back chambers or anything like that. I honestly don't really care. But yeah, I think it's 5 gallons or of less to it. It doesn't matter. I mean, I have seen Picos that actually is like a 2 gallon with like a 2 gallon also sump, which I think they're pretty sweet. But I'm like, I think it's more water volume.
Well, yeah, and that sounds like we're getting into work. We don't want work.
Yeah.
I know, yeah. I think it's cool, but I'm like, why?
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
right. Like if you're going to have that kind of complication and those failure points, you really might as well have a bigger tank and then you can have some fish.
Yeah.
Right, you could put a more variety of animals in there, right? Instead of trying to
More variety of animals.
keep it to 2 or 3 things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I think everybody has their own way of, doing it. And if you think that that's, something that they like, hey, why not, right? But yeah, I do like simplicity. I mean, even on my bigger tanks, like I have my anemone tank, it doesn't even have power heads because I was able to work it out where just the return pump does well enough and the random flow generators. And I think it's with everything. It's like now with all the technology that we have, which is great. But I think a lot of people also tend to be like, oh, well, let's put this and let's do this and let's do that. And we add so much to a system, small or big, that we kind of lose like what, like the main thing of, I don't know. I just think, we all have different ways of reefing, and if people love the technology and having a ton of equipment is good, but also know that there is other ways to do it. There is also simple ways to do it, and I just feel like some people have told me, oh, I really love to start this, but I can't because it's so expensive. It's like, well, you can also start small. You can also start way more simple with way less equipment, So I think also simplicity is good too.
What forums or other media sources do you guys recommend for someone new who wants to start a Pico?
I will say Facebook, And I'm not big on Facebook. Like, if you guys see my profile, I have like 80 friends. So I'm not big on Facebook, but I do like Ask Bulk Resupply, is one of the groups that I'm on that I like. I'm also on the Nano BioCube and Nano group that is on Facebook. Then Instagram. I'm big on Instagram. But I think it's more, even no matter on which group you are, you definitely want to make sure you're getting good information. Because, like Vicky said, there is a lot of people that are, especially with Pico and Nanos, is that kind of all thinking of how are you doing this and how is it surviving and why are you doing this, because everything is going to grow out and this is useless and why don't you get a bigger tank and all of these questions. So definitely you have to like filter out all of those type of like negative thinking and trying to look for those people that are not telling you just negative things because they haven't tried themselves. Just look for those people that are actually actively doing it and actively doing it good, in a good way, that you can see and see their vases and see their picos and be like, oh, okay. Some are just blatantly just trying to shoot you down, but there's some that honestly do not know that it can be done. So they're just trying to be helpful because of with what they know. But sadly, that what they know might not be accurate or might not be up to date. So yeah, I think the main thing is whatever forum you go, definitely filter out and find those that are giving you the right information and that you can corroborate by looking at their pictures, that they can, kind of put you in the right direction.
I concur with Patty about the filtering that you need to do on like Facebook and Instagram. The only forum that I'm fairly active in is Nano Reef. I'm Natalia La Loca on Nano Reef. If you want to check out my stuff. Yeah, like the format of Facebook and Instagram, I'm not sure. I feel like there is just, anytime someone asks a question, there's going to be, like at least 50% misinformation coming in the comments. I guess I'm more used to long format stuff on the, on like Nano Reef.
My first thought is Nano Reef as well. Like that is the place where you go, because that's got all of the information and they've been up for so long. There's such a depth of information. It's a forum that gets forgotten about a lot, but it's been around for 20 years. There is a depth of information there.
The owner and other members attended the first Women in Reefing event and continue to support us. Thank you, nanoreef.com.
I get invited to all the Facebook groups and I turn them all off on my notifications. What I do is I actually just share what I'm doing, and I have a lot of just friends everywhere, and they all like to offer free advice. So, and so I kind of let them be my Google bots out there in all the forums so that I don't have to check them. They'll tell me what they just read or whatever the cool thing is, and then I'll go find it. Me personally, I like to learn a lot from YouTube videos. So I may go dig into a couple different YouTube videos that are relevant. They definitely don't have all the answers, but I really like to come up with my own answers for most things. So
there's no really clear single answer to anything. I mean, there's always multiple ways to go about doing something. Like these are complex systems, and as complex systems, there's like infinite different ways to solve a problem, and that's part of what makes it frustrating, and it's also what makes it really wonderful too. Yeah, I just set up an Instagram account for my reef bowls, and so that's kind of fun.
Yay!
Well, but it's a real different thing. Instagram is also weird because like I feel like I see a lot of big tanks that are like wall to wall, $500 scolies, and like I just feel like it's creating kind of a what's the term that I'm looking for? Like displays of wealth to me. And like I just feel like it maybe sends the wrong message. And like in particular, I'm really uncomfortable about corals that are very difficult to propagate in captivity and that you have to wild collect. I don't know. Again, I really try to be ethical with this hobby. This is my cat, by the way.
Hi,
He's captive bred.
Go ahead,
Joanne. Yeah, I really like the displays of wealth statement. That's exactly what I see too. It's So frustrating. And there's the overnight setups. You can go to your local fish store and you can buy colonies and they'll sell you colonies. And then you can take pictures of it and put it on Instagram and you have a fully fledged tank and it looks great. And then 6 months later, you're A, no longer an influencer because B, your tank crashed, and C, you didn't know what you were doing.
I do see that there is a lot of showing off. And it's not, I think there are different ways of showing off because, showing off is you're proud of something that you're doing and you want to show it off, and that's fine. But I also see more of showing off of, oh, look at all of this equipment and look at all of these and look at all of these brands, which happens on all types of hobbies and all types of, different avenues. Yeah. So my thing is more of, we should focus also on learning, on teaching, or sharing. And I don't want to say teaching because I myself share. I feel more like I share my journey, my progress. I share my big, expensive water box tanks, but I also have my Pico tanks where I don't have to spend, thousands of dollars to put it together. I have an auto top off that can cost like $200. But I also have a little water bottle, out of top of that only costs $15. So I think, I do like to cover like a whole way of reefing that is not just, buy this $200 because it works. It's like, no, you can also buy this little, out of top of that, you can have it for $15 and work the same way. So I think we should share like the different types of reefing or how you can do it. I think it is good for everyone.
What advice would you give to a new woman in reefing that wants to start a Pico tank?
Think about what you want to have and build your system around it.
To keep it simple. Keep it simple and find one or two people that have Picos, that have them for a while, that are thriving, and get information from one or two sources that you can trust by seeing what they have done themselves and go from there.
Well, just like learn how their systems work. So that's where the old school stuff comes in, because a lot of these websites have tank of the month profiles that where people are asked to explain in great detail how their system works. And that's how I set up my reef bowls. Is I was looking at those tank of the month profiles. There were a couple of people that had, Vase Reefs before mine, and I just went into tremendous detail looking into how they made them work and why they worked, and just standing on the shoulders of giants.
Anything in addition, Joanne?
I would say it's not a bad idea as a good place to start because you learn about things in a simple way. And then because of your small environment, you cannot do too much at one time. A lot of times the failures that we see in the hobby come from trying too many things at one time. And when you've got just a small garden to play in, you can't put too many tomato plants in there. You don't have space for it.
No, great point.
It's also cool to just try things out on Picos and smaller tanks. Like I just removed all carbon and all of type of thing from my Picos, and I just put some microalgae, and I wanted to see kind of keep it clear, kind of keep it, without any type of chemical filtration. And it's working pretty good with my Cheeto or Kato and my little, I believe it's called Lerpa. It might be something different, but yeah.
Are there any other Pico tips that you want to share, ladies?
Don't get Xenia unless you want to have it be a Xenia bowl.
Yeah, and I would say, I would think you'd want to stay away from any of the corals that slime a lot, right? So Xenia is in that category. Like a staghorn slime or acropore is probably fine because they only slime when you irritate them. But yeah, those corals that just get really nasty when you frag them and leave them alone in a bag.
Well, use anything that has serious sweeper tentacles. I forgot to mention that. I had a beautiful Favia that
Pectinia is probably not a good idea.
Oh, I loved that Favia too. It was such a bummer. It was doing great. It was doing too well. It basically ate one of my favorite acans.
Oh no.
I will say leather corals too. I normally tend not to have them at all. But any of those corals are also, when they implode type of thing, it will, you definitely, those corals that you need a lot of water. Like I even had a anemone. I had a baby bubble tip anemone on a Pico tank, on one of my 2-gallon one. And I did remove it because first it walks all over, and then it's something that I had to keep an eye more. I could definitely keep it, but my thing with Picos is keep it simple. Keep it something that you just have to do water change and be done. So it's not like you cannot have it. You can maybe try, but know that it will be more, you need to give them more attention.
Who are your role models in the Pico tank world?
Felicia's inspiring.
Yeah. Felicia McCulley actually intended to join us for this interview, but scheduling conflicts happen. So you can read more about her unicorn reef ball on reefs.com, and you will see Felicia on future Women in Reefing videos.
Yeah, she's super inspiring. And yeah, Mary Arroyo is the person behind the Vase Reef. So that's cool. And I'm just in general, I feel like I'm seeing a lot more women in the hobby right now, which is super great.
No. I love everybody. Every time I'm inspired by somebody, I shoot you their name and say we should interview them. So yeah, that's my answer. Anybody that you see interviewed or talked about with Women in Reefing is probably something I'm inspired by.
Great answer. And anybody who watches this video, definitely always tell us in the comments if there's someone you want to see interviewed that's very inspiring. Thank you, ladies, for sharing your experiences, and thank all of you for watching the video. We'll see you on the next Women in Reefing featured video.
Make sure you're subscribed to all of the Women in Reefing channels so that you never miss a feature video or any other cool plans we're going to be rolling out pretty soon.
Speaking of cool things, if you are interested in setting up a Pico tank, be sure to enter the Women in Reefing PICO giveaway, coming to all of the Women in Reefing channels this week.